All right. Hello, everyone. This is a case study on PTSD by Andres and Harula.
Now, what this little presentation is going to consist of is first defining what is PTSD, followed by some of its causes. Next, its symptoms, followed by trauma, the effects of it, treatment, some statistics. We have some experiences that we can share, and then ended up with the conclusion and our works cited.
All right. So first of all, we have a definition of PTSD. It is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event. So who gets PTSD? It's given to anyone who has either experienced or witnessed something terrifying. And what it may feel like is people with PTSD often feel uncontrollably angry, irritable, and on high alert. Furthermore, they'll have nightmares and intrusive memories about the traumatic event.
Now, what can cause PTSD? Well, one of the most common PTSD is uncomplicated PTSD. Some other types can be normal stress response, which occurs in adults starting to experience bad memories. There's acute stress disorder characterized by a panic of reactions, mental confusion, insomnia, and more. Comorbid PTSD occurs alongside the psychiatric disorder and may be more common than uncomplicated PTSD. And the final one that we have is complex PTSD, where individuals are exposed to prolonged traumatic events, especially during childhood.
All right, so now we have some early symptoms of PTSD. So first of all, you have experiencing the event again, so flashbacks, emotional distress or physical reactions when being reminded about the traumatic event. You've got avoiding thinking of talking about the incident and also avoiding places or people that remind the person of the traumatic event.
Now, with PTSD, there comes some trauma, and while there are types of trauma that have been categorized, the first type of trauma is war and military. Now, with this type of trauma, military service members who have just returned from combat have experienced many intrusive symptoms and events that cause PTSD. This can change them by making them more hypervigilant, avoiding similar situations to the event, or they can experience negative thoughts and have negative feelings. The second type of trauma is terrorism and disaster. When a human witnesses horror and tragedy, it drains us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The types of trauma with this, it wreaks havoc on our sense of emotional well-being, subjecting us to a whirlwind of emotions. We get overwhelmed with intense feelings such as sad, grief, fear, helplessness, anger, rage, or we are emotionally numb and we're in shock and disbelief. And the third type of trauma is abuse and sexual. Sexual abuse, both forms, is a particular sinister type of trauma because of the shame it instills onto the victim. The victim has no part to be blamed whatsoever, and it is terrible. And another form of sexual abuse is found within child, which is also wrong. Victims are often too young to know what has happened to them, and they don't know how to express and seek help.
It's loading. Okay, so now we have effects of PTSD. So this is where PTSD might affect someone's life. So it can affect them in their family, so living together becomes harder. On top of that, the person with PTSD is easily startled and has nightmares. It can also be in relationships. So development of close relationships become in trouble, and it can cause problems with trust, closeness, communication, and also problem solving. And also in military families, it can affect how couples get along with each other, and it can also directly affect the mental health of partners.
Okay, and now we come to the treatment of PTSD. Now, before getting any treatment, the symptoms need to be assessed to make sure the individual gets the right treatment. One way to assess it is called watchful waiting, where they are monitored and they get the symptoms, and then they see if they can be improved or worsened based off of the environment the individual is placed in or is living in or around it. Another form is CBT, or otherwise known as cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a type of therapy designed to help manage problems by changing how people think and how they act. Group therapy is speaking about problems with other people who have PTSD, and through that method, it's helpful in finding ways to manage and understand these symptoms.
Okay, so here we have some graphs and statistics showing how and where PTSD has affected people. So here we can see that PTSD, or the cause of PTSD, is high in physical assault, followed by other sexual trauma and sexual assault such as rape. And then you also have the sudden death of a loved one or even transportation. Um, and then you have illnesses and weapon assault, severe suffering, accident, and lastly, natural disaster, which is the least. And then on the right side here, you have another graph showing how PTSD has increased throughout the years from 2000 to 2012. It has been increasing, and then there was a sudden decrease from 2012 to 2014.
Now, here come some experiences or people who have thoughts regarding PTSD. The first person we have is Oso Bopel. A little background about Oso Bopel: he is a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, newly-ish retired, maybe about a year and a half ago. And I decided to ask him the question, being a lieutenant colonel in the Army and with so many men under your command, have you seen any one of them or anyone else with PTSD? And to his response was, I guess to a degree one could say yes. I find it difficult defining PTSD for some, but yes, some people have PTSD based on their experience and mental capabilities to cope with the stress.
Here you have um, another person who has experienced or somehow. So here we have Kalani. He is being in service to our country, and we asked the question of, have you ever come into contact with someone who's had or was having PTSD? And his response was, one guy I know did many tours and came to the department and was having a hard time. He was a successful patrol officer, but had a hard time adjusting back. He had a hard time dealing with his life, which eventually caused problems with his wife. His wife began to feel threatened by his strange behavior. He got bad to the point where my SWAT team had to go get him, and even then, he kept them at bay for several hours before the arrest was official. I housed the guy in my jail facility and was charged with a 422 PC code, which is a terrorist attack. This turned into a public disturbance. He turned from a good guy to whatever he saw overseas. Then he came back home being not in the right headspace.
The last person we decided to interview was Joseph. Now, Joseph served in the Marines, and the question asked to him was, serving in the Marines, have you ever come across people or friends that have PTSD? If not, what are your thoughts about it? His response was, I've been in combat 3 different times in 4 years. My highest award is NAM with a combat V. He very much specified that he is extremely proud of earning that medal. And he also did decide to share with us that he was diagnosed with PTSD. Upon hearing this, we immediately said, okay, well, knowing this, please feel free to not share whatever you do not feel comfortable with sharing. We do not want to be rude or anything of the sort. And he was very thankful, and he continued with, it is a disease that comes with triggers. Some weird things that affect him are things like his back cannot be against somebody, and his back can't be towards the door to a restaurant. And he can have people behind his back as long as he knows that they are there. And he also expressed that it was a hard time sleeping because most of his firefights and his in-action combat fights were at night. And it was hard for him to sleep every now and then. And another thing he shared was that movies sometimes trigger him.
So this is our conclusion of PTSD. So from what we have found, we have determined that PTSD is a real thing that affects a lot of people in a negative way. Furthermore, it not only affects them in a bad way, but it also has had a negative effect on relationships or bonds. It increases the chances to develop developmental disorders. The C for help is highly suggested, and if you're unsure, then you should still go as a precaution for you and those around you.
And finally, we're excited of other sources that we wanted to also develop our presentation. And here they are. If you guys would like to search for them, feel free to take a photo. And yeah, this is the end of our project. Thank you for listening, and have a good one.